Advocates recently began a campaign at the State House to expand access to early education. To talk about their legislation and strategy are the statewide pre-K director with Stand for Children Massachusetts, Stephanie Sanchez, and the director of Early Education for All, Amy O'Leary. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Amy O'Leary because first put this into perspective. We hear about more and more children are getting access to pre-K, but what about the children who are not?
That's a good point. What we know right now statewide is about 60% of children have access to preschool. And we know that most of the cost of that is being paid by the parents. In Boston, the numbers are very similar. About 60–65% of preschoolers have access to a preschool program. We also know in Boston and across the state that the public school system is working in partnership with community-based providers to ensure that families' needs are met for their young children.
And what about the advantages of having pre-K? Let's say if you check those children in grade 3, look at their reading scores, what's the difference?
We know that high-quality pre-kindergarten makes a huge difference in the short and long-term benefits for children. We know that there's improved third-grade reading skills. We know that they're more likely to graduate from high school and more likely to go to college. There are 3 major longitudinal studies that have followed preschool-age children into their 40s and have shown very long-term benefits.
Stephanie Sanchez, what are the other things that's going on here? You've got to get something through the state legislature or the budget process. Right. So what's the strategy?
Well, luckily it's a 2-year legislative process, so we have a little bit of time with that, but our bill is sponsored by the Education Chairwoman Alice Peisch, so that's very helpful. She will help shepherd it through the legislation, through the legislature, and Senator Sal DiDomenico is sponsoring a bill on the Senate side, and so he will be shepherding that through. We're expecting the next stop to be a hearing on the bill. That will just be the process it will take, and then we'll see how it comes out of the hearing and goes on through the legislative process. But there's a reason they say sometimes you don't want to see sausage being made or legislation. It's a long-term process. There'll be many discussions on what will be best for the bill in terms of making high-quality pre-K a reality.
Yeah, get into a little bit of the specifications here about what kind of providers and how do you ensure quality?
Yep. Well, we actually are basing it on the New Jersey model, which is from the Abbott schools in New Jersey, where they have a criteria of about 10 to 25 different points that would make it high quality. So part of that is a ratio of student to teacher, 10 to 1. And so there would not be a maximum, there would be a maximum of students in the class just to make that a very quality experience. There's a curriculum involved that would be high quality. There's teacher credentials, having a BA. That would be part of this process of making sure that we have a high quality program. And part of that has also been professional development, having a mentor in the classroom. Luckily, we'll be able to look to New Jersey to see what made their model so successful, as they were able to help close the achievement gap by 50% in some of the districts they were working in. And of course, that's the problem we're facing here in Massachusetts, is to help close the achievement gap. And we really feel high quality pre-K will do that.
Amy, when I was growing up in my pre-K years, I was around the house a lot. There were older brothers. We had a parent at home most of the day. There were parents up and down the street. A lot of verbalizing going on, a lot of learning. What did you do? You taught pre-K. What were those kids getting that they couldn't get at home?
I think even when I was young, I went to pre-K for a social experience. We know that families want to make sure that their children have the academic skills, but also the social skills, standing in line, following directions. We know when we talk to employers that they want high-quality employees later on in the pipeline, and we know all those skills take their root in early education. So parents who are working need both a place for their young children, but also want the best for their children as far as school readiness. So what these programs provide is a place for that to happen.
Stephanie, when you're trying to pursue this in the State House, you want to appeal to as many people as you can, but you also want to get to the places that need the most help. So what are you going to do?
Well, for that, we also have a model in the sense that we're trying to be very strategic about our legislation. So we've used the Federal Expansion Pre-K grant that's recently been given to 5 communities in the state of Massachusetts. So that would be Lawrence, Lowell, Holyoke, Springfield, and Boston. So we will look to see how it works here. They're obviously high-need communities. And then we can model our legislation on that. And it already is a targeted approach that we've taken with our legislation to make sure that it's the under underperforming schools, what are known as level 5 through 3 schools. So the schools that need it the most will get the help first. So that's our targeted phased-in approach to this legislation, and making sure, to your point, it goes to the right places in a high priority order.
But don't you feel you got an uphill fight? I mean, look at what was going on under Governor Patrick. He wanted universal pre-K. I mean, he accomplished some of what he wanted, but not nearly as much as he hoped.
Well, that's a good point, too. I think we've taken our lessons from that. While universal pre-K would be ideal, it's just fiscally not as realistic right now, because the price tag for that could be as much as $1.2 billion. So we're not talking about that same number with our targeted phased-in approach, which is why in this challenging fiscal climate, we feel that ours is more realistic. But when people are thinking of other needs like transportation with this past winter, we don't want it to be an either-or situation. It's and. We cannot be choosing between transportation and investing in our children, because actually it's a cost savings if we look at the high quality pre-K in terms of return on investment. So in some situations that just is such a cost savings. There's also a recent report from Duke University that said that we could reduce special education placements if children are enrolled in a high-quality pre-K program. And that would save municipalities a ton of money in terms of their local budgets.
What about that, Amy? I remember all those first-grade retentions that we used to have. Maybe we still do. I hope we don't.
I think looking across the continuum, starting at birth to the end of 3rd grade, we know there are many milestones of development for young children. And I think what we are looking for with this program is to ensure that children are learning the social skills, the academic skills to move ahead. But also what we have seen in communities is when the public school, with the leadership of a superintendent, and the private child care community has been getting together, we have seen pretty amazing things happen. So we are encouraged by the progress that we have made in Massachusetts, but we know that there are places that need more, and we want to make sure that it's high quality, so we ensure those benefits for the short and the long term.
Stephanie, what about the benefits? Because you have clearer line on how this makes things better for the children, but what about the rest of the state, the economy?
That's a great point. I mean, there have been editorials recently that have said the future workforce of our Commonwealth is going to look very different than it does now. And we want to prepare particularly children from low-income communities where they may not be getting the parental readiness at home, the skills that Amy was referring to. So we want to be able to make sure that those students have this high-quality experience, because that's one of the long-term benefits to the economy. As you mentioned, it's not only that we would save the $350,000 dropout rate, the remediation and things that you've been mentioning, but it's a boon to the economy when parents can go back to work, they pay taxes, they're feeling accomplished. So as Amy said, people still need a place to have their children have a good experience, and we just want to make sure that it's a high quality experience so that it can be a win-win situation for everybody.
Thank you both very much, Stephanie Sanchez and Amy O'Leary.
Thank you.
We'll have more news in just a moment.